Now let's take a step back from the Cenobites and talk about Yugi's costume from the beginning of the series. In an interview, someone asked Takahashi what was his inspiration for Yugi's outfit. And I'm gonna read this word for word. I was a fan of Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands, and that actually influenced Yugi's costume. I thought the lines and details of that sort of bondage fashion were really cool. Yu-Gi-Oh! Begins in a high school setting, but having an ordinary school uniform jacket with a t-shirt underneath would be boring. So I gave Yugi the bondage elements underneath the jacket. It's definitely unusual. Laughs. Ho ho ho. Now I'm gonna let my partner Tim take over and talk about the Devilman series within Yu-Gi-Oh's franchise.
Alright, so I'm going to start out by talking about the Devilman series and how it connects to Yu-Gi-Oh! Fair warning, I will be going into some spoilers about the Devilman series, so if you haven't read or watched it, you may want to skip ahead. Devilman was a horror manga created by Go Nagai in 1972. It was one of the first manga to really venture into the horror genre, and it remains one of the most influential to this day. Later in 1972, an anime series was created. Since then, various other anime adaptations have been made, including series, OVAs, and movies, possibly the most popular of which being Devilman Crybaby on Netflix. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise pays homage to Devilman in various areas. One of the biggest homages in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise is the character of Bakura. In the Japanese version, Bakura's first name is Ryo. This is a direct reference to Ryo Asuka, the character in Devilman who becomes Satan. Similarly, in Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, the protagonist, Yusei Fudo, is named after the protagonist of Devilman, Akira Fudo. But Ryo Bakura and Ryo Asuka have more in common than just their names. Bakura has several traits in common with Ryo, including their outfits, character design, and general role within the story. In the Devilman series, Ryo comes to Akira as a friend and warns him of an incoming demon invasion. As an effort to thwart the invasion, they perform a ritual in which Akira becomes infused with the demon Amon and becomes Devilman. This would eventually lead to their climactic battle in their alternate forms as Devilman versus Satan. Similarly, in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, Ryo Bakura befriends Yugi Muto, while the spirits in their Millennium items are destined to have an epic battle for the fate of mankind. Another interesting connection is a design quirk shown in all of the characters connected to the Millennium Ring. Each of the characters connected to the Millennium Ring have the horns of Zork in some form on their face, including Bakura's hair, Priest Mahad's headdress, and even Aigami's hair. This is likely a reference to the small wings on Satan's head in the Devilman series. However, it could also be a reference to the facial horns on Akira in Devilman. Another character from the Devilman series who's referenced in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is Jinmen. Jinmen is a sadistic turtle demon who devours humans only for them to appear on his shell. He uses them as a defense mechanism against Akira, who does not want to hurt the humans on his back. This is referenced in Pegasus's monsters Relinquished and Thousand Eyes Restrict, who will suck in Yugi's monsters and then use them as a defense mechanism, in which Yugi will lose life points if he attacks them. Another possible reference to Jinmen is with the monster card Fusion Devourer, which is a large demon monster that appears to have souls sprouting out of its back. This monster is used in GX by Scar, Scout of Darkworld. The last Devilman homage we'll talk about is the character of Yubel, who is a prominent character from the GX series. Yubel is in many ways an homage to various elements of Devilman, including the characters of Zenon and Satan. In Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Yubel is a hermaphroditic demon who's in love with the protagonist Judai Yuki and coaxes out Judai's dark side. This is similar to the Devilman series, in which Satan coaxes out the dark side of Akira. Now I'd like to talk a bit about body horror. If you don't know what body horror is, it's essentially the use of bodily mutation as a form of horror. Some examples of body horror are Akira, Parasite, Society, and the works of David Cronenberg, who we'll get into a little bit later. While body horror isn't particularly prevalent in the anime, there are various scenes in the manga that implement body horror that were then changed for the anime version. One such scene is in the final duel with Yugi and Bakura, in which Bakura pulls a dual disc out of his arm in a mutated fashion. In the anime version, it just sort of fades onto his arm, which really isn't as cool or scary. Another key body horror scene in the Yu-Gi-Oh manga is in the death of Bandit Keith. In the anime version, Pegasus presses a button on the floor which sends Bandit Keith into the ocean, where he is later revealed to have survived. In the manga version, Pegasus uses the powers of the Millennium Eye to give Bandit Keith a penalty game for cheating. In this penalty game, Bandit Keith's hand is turned into a gun and he is forced to point the gun at his head and shoot himself in the head. This sequence bears a striking resemblance to David Cronenberg's 1983 film Videodrome, in which James Woods plays a character whose hand gets turned into a gun and in the final sequence shoots himself in the head with it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jason, who's going to talk about some of the card archetypes and how they tie into various horror elements.
So the Alien archetype, in particular, is mostly based on the Ridley Scott Alien franchise, with Alien Warrior being very clearly based on the Alien Queen, Alien Dog being more of an obscure reference because the original design for the alien was a dog in a costume. And I might be reaching here, but I think that the card artwork might be a reference to the dog in the alien costume. And the odd one out is, in name and inspiration, is Cosmic Horror Gangliel, which is clearly based on H.P. Lovecraft's Cthulhu, which might get a bit more into H.P. Lovecraft later. The Revendred line is based on an interesting mix of Spawn and Resident Evil, with the Vendreds being pretty unanimously based on Resident Evil, while the Revendreds are based on Spawn. Revendred Slayer and Revendred Executioner, in particular, are based on different forms of Spawn. The wiki lists them as based on Wesker, but the wiki is definitely not correct in that regard, because just look at the guy, that has Todd McFarlane written all over it. And Vendred Hound Horde is based on the dogs from Resident Evil 1 and 2. I don't remember if they're in 3 or not, I haven't played the game in quite a while. And Vendred Chimera is based on more of the variety of the mutations that the T-Virus causes, such as the Lickers and the Tyrants and anything in that regard. The Outer Entity line is very clearly based on H.P. Lovecraft. In fact, they barely even changed the names. They just changed the spelling slightly. On a few of them, Outer Entity Hastur in particular is based off Hastur, one of the gods from H.P. Lovecraft, usually the speaker for the gods, always clad in yellow. And they just added an extra R to his name. Outer Entity Nyarla is based on Nyarlathotep, one of my favorite Lovecraftian deities, the Crawling Chaos. Outer Entity Azathoth is based on Azathoth, which is more the chaotic god of false knowledge in Lovecraft that is the one who caused a lot of troubles for the other outer gods and sort of takes on a Lucifer-esque role in much of the mythology. I spent a lot of time tying Lovecraft and Gnostic Gospels together when I played Persona 5 Royal recently, because wow, it does a lot of that at the end of the game. And Outer Entity Cthulhu is based on the Cthulhu, which has no relation to Cthulhu, but is instead a fire spirit. And these creatures looked very different in the anime in particular, as you can see here. Don't worry, I'm joking. That's from another anime called Nyarko-san Crawling with Love, or Hyor Nyarko-san. Another archetype that sort of qualifies under the horror aspect would be the Fallen Angel, or as they're known in English, the Darklord archetype, usually named after actual angel names from the Bible and other mythologies, such as the Gnostic Gospels. But the most notable one I can really talk about would be Darklord Morningstar, in Japan known as Fallen Angel Lucifer, which is pretty obvious what that is inspired by, is the biblical character of Lucifer, which I know a ton about, and if I mentioned all his lore, I'd be here all day. But I think we will be. So basically Lucifer was... No, I'm joking. We're not going to do that. And moving on to one of my favorite archetypes from Duel Links back when it was actually meta, that was a beautiful, 2 months. The vampires. Because Yu-Gi-Oh! Is also made by Konami, the vampire archetype very clearly follows inspiration from Castlevania, with Vampire Scarlet Scourge clearly being Alucard, Vampire Hunter being a Belmont, specifically looking a bit like Leon, but Simon's the most popular, so a lot of people usually go for Simon. Vampire Fräulein is based off Carmella from Castlevania, who you might recognize from the recent TV show on Netflix. And Vampire Grace is the odd one out, being based on Elizabeth Bathory rather than anybody from the Castlevania series. So we had to have an image of Elizabeth Bathory, who is famous for inspiring many vampire myths because she would bathe in the blood of virgins, thinking it would keep her eternally young, inspiring many vampire myths.
Thank you for tuning into my little Halloween special. I hope that you have a safe and wonderful Halloween this year. We all know that the pandemic might be getting to us, but we can all celebrate Halloween by either buying candy or hanging with friends through Discord. Don't lose hope. We'll find a way out of this pandemic. Goodbye!